So, Mike, from the acquirer standpoint, are there any do's and don'ts that you would share with the device companies that they should or shouldn't do?
Well, I think so much of it is kind of event or situation specific. I'd applaud Ron's comments. Number one, I think the balance sheet is king. You know, I've lost track of the number of people in the last year who have told me that they have options. And, you know, sooner or later I'm bound to say, I hope you do, because I do. And, you know, I trust that you're going to do what's in your best interest just as we're going to do what's in ours. But at the end of the day, you can look at the balance sheet and you know whether they have options or not, right? So I think absolutely the balance sheet is king. I think paying attention to people is number two. I don't think I've ever personally regretted over-hiring for a position, or I think in the deals we've made, the ones that have worked really well are the ones where they had solid teams in place. The third thing I would say is, you know, kind of be candid and transparent about both the risk as well as the opportunities. And having been in a small company, I know you're just kind of charged up about the opportunity. But I've never been involved in a business situation where you didn't make trade-offs. And essentially what you're trading off are risk and opportunities. And I think you just lose credibility if the only path you can see is the one you selected, and not acknowledge that, you know, maybe there are alternative paths and we've thought about it and here's why we didn't select
it. They've hit on some really good high points. Some of the other things I'll offer are maybe more tactical in nature for some smaller companies. What I've seen in buying some of these smaller companies is that oftentimes it's a full-time job to sell your company, and if the team or the management team doesn't go in prepared to actually hire a buffer, maybe a financial advisor, if they take it all upon themselves to sell the company, you can get distracted in the sale process and lose focus in your core business. So revenues might slow down, customers might get lost, and the worst thing you can do in the sale process when you're talking about price and negotiations is to have your business slip. So one thing I'd say is that if you are going to engage in the sale process with a big company, find a way to keep your eye on both balls, the core business as well as the sale process. I think I'll touch on the other side of the earn-out side that was mentioned. Corporations often try and do earn-outs to the extent that there's a valuation gap to bridge between buyer and seller. Not as easy to do in a public deal like Ron was a part of, but many private companies, and definitely in the medical device space and the life science tools space, earn-outs are pretty common. Get very specific about them, and from an acquirer side, we want to be very specific about them as well, because we don't want a circumstance where there's a frustrated entrepreneur or a management team isn't able to hit milestones, because the other side of milestones, if a big corporation like Life Technology doesn't pay them, is that a frustrated entrepreneur will litigate and create more headaches down the road. So I'll be pretty transparent. We've done lots of earnouts, and some of them go to litigation, and we're still dealing with things 2 to 3 years after the deal is done, which are frankly just headaches in our opinion. So those are two things to think about as you do some of these acquisitions and dealing with big corporate deal makers.
Okay. And do you have any pet peeves in transactions that you've done, just things that companies should absolutely avoid?
and have pretty thick skin. Other than people who remind me that they have options.
Other things that sometimes sellers think it's cute or think it's timely to share their awards, some of the worst parts of the parts of diligence. They'll share it at the very end, hoping that there's so much deal momentum in the deal that if I show you the worst part of my company and I show it to you a few days before signing, you'll gloss over it or you won't spend time focusing on it, and then you'll do the deal anyway. So I think one of our pet peeves is when you're working with somebody, it's a friendly negotiation, you feel like everything's transparent, and then a few days before you get a disclosure of some kind, and it creates a big problem. And big corporations have options in that we've got big balance sheets. We don't have to buy this company or that company. There are always alternatives. So big companies are generally more inclined to just walk away or to restructure a deal at the last minute if there's a last minute disclosure. So it's always best to be candid, transparent, and come clean with everything early on in a process, and both parties, if they're rational, will get through things.
Yeah, if I can add some commentary to that, because I know when we initially got the call from Jeff, we began to due diligence probably in the July timeframe of last year. I got my team together because I wanted to partition off a very small group because our business was on a roll, and the last thing we wanted to do was just what these guys said, and that's to see the business flatten because we're distracted. So I think the first thing we did is get in a room and say, all right, let's get all the things that are bad about the company on a piece of paper or papers, and let's get them in front of these guys early. So we kill it early, we don't kill ourselves, and that was a good strategy, except that they didn't believe we were doing that because they've been doing enough deals like these guys. But wait a minute, everything happens at the end. Why are you doing this at the beginning? Well, because we're honest guys. We want to know as well as you do. I don't want to go through a process with GE and get to the end and it not happen. I want to know now if it's not going to happen so I can move on because we weren't really interested in selling the business anyway. And I look back at that and your comment kind of reminded me that they reacted very negatively towards me saying, hey, this is all the things we want to talk about up front. You know, you got these billing risks, these reimbursement risks, all these things. And it was funny because when they came in to do due diligence, those were the things obviously they attacked first because we had highlighted them for them. But it did pay off in the end because we closed it, you know, we basically finalized the negotiation on price in the last week in September. We closed the deal on the 20th of December. And so really it worked out well because when they got in, they realized there weren't anything else. The shoes had already dropped and that was a good